Hello and welcome to the first video of our Advanced Game Engine Scripting First-Person Narrative Project Setup. For this first video, I'm going to overview how to set up your development environment. So it's going to involve getting the right version of Unity that we have at school, and the right version of Visual Studio, and getting Git set up for us. So first of all, let's look into getting Unity. So I'm just going to head to the Unity download link here. It's just store.unity.com/download. And if you don't have Unity already, this is how you can get it. Now, I'm going to recommend that we just start by downloading the Unity Hub. So this is how you can download that. And once you're finished downloading, go ahead and install it. So here's the Unity Hub once it's done installing. I like the Unity Hub as opposed to the regular installer because it helps you manage multiple installs of Unity. I'm normally working on lots of different projects, and some of them just need to be on different versions of Unity, and this helps it stay organized. What you might notice is that if we go to download the version that I said we needed, um, which is 2018.3.1, and that's just because that's what we have on the school computers. It's actually not listed here. So there's a couple ways we can deal with that. You could visit the Unity download archive here, and that's what I'm going to do. And find the one that you want to download, and you could just download it. Or if you notice, there's actually support for the Unity Hub here if we click this one. So I'm going to do that. I'll just click this one right here. And yeah, I'm fine with opening this link in Unity Hub. And we can see what's going to happen here. So it starts installing, and it asks us what components we want to add to our install. So because you can always add these things later, and I don't have any plans for most of this stuff. I'm going to go ahead and uncheck it just to make my download faster. So I'm going to leave WebGL because we might use that. And I'm going to leave documentation. But other than that, I think we can leave all the rest of this unchecked. And if we ever need it later, we can always get it. So we're just going to check WebGL and documentation, and we'll leave the rest unchecked, and I'll hit done. And Windows asks me if I want to allow it to install, and I had to hit yes. And here's our little progress bar, and so you'll see that it's going to start downloading. So while it's downloading, I'll point out, I'll go ahead and put the link to this presentation in the video description, so you can find all these links easily there. So while that's downloading, we can start looking into our next thing here, Visual Studio. So let's go ahead and check that out. So for Visual Studio, you'll see I'm on Windows. There's multiple options here. I'm going to make sure I choose Community because that's the free one. So if you don't already have Visual Studio Community, go ahead and do that. If you're on Mac, Visual Studio for Mac will work also. And there should be a free version of that also. And that's all we really need. Same thing with Unity. If it ever asks you, we're okay with the personal version because we don't make over $100,000 off our games. Or if you do, that's awesome. But it's a good problem to have, I guess. And then you have to pay for the more expensive versions. But we don't, most likely aren't falling into that class. So let's just get all of the free versions of all this stuff. Now I actually already have Visual Studio on my computer, and you might have that too. And if that's the case, I'm going to suggest that you open the Start menu here and start typing Visual Studio Installer. And here's the Visual Studio Installer. So if you have Visual Studio Community 2017 already, you can look at this installer and it'll help us figure out what version we have. And I have to click yes, I want to allow that to make changes. And it should come up for me here in a sec. All right. So it says you need to update the Visual Studio installer before proceeding. Okay, that's fine. Go ahead and do that. So once it's done downloading, it'll automatically install. That should go pretty fast. And then it should finally open up the installer. Alright, so here you see the Visual Studio installer. Now, if you remember, I'm recommending that we use Visual Studio Community 15.9.5 or above. This is because this will be the version we have at school. If you look at my Visual Studio installer, I actually don't have that one. So let's go ahead and go through that update process. Now right now, at the time I'm recording this, it looks like this is the newest version. So all I have to do is hit update and I'm in good shape. You may not, you may watch this video later and there could be a newer version out. And I think it's probably okay to just update to whatever the current version is. So whatever it's doing, just go ahead and update. And so once this is done, I will have the latest and greatest version of Visual Studio to use with Unity. So Visual Studio is a pretty big download. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video while this is finishing, and I will kick things back up as soon as it's done. Alright, so my Visual Studio has finished downloading, and at this point, I'm just going to double check that I have the components that need to be installed for Visual Studio to work with Unity. And if you ever notice that your Unity, like if Visual Studio's IntelliSense, which is sort of like its autocomplete feature, isn't working with Unity for you, you might want to double check this stuff. So I'm going to click Modify here. And then I'm going to go through this list of workloads and make sure that the one that says Game Development with Unity is checked. And so if that's already checked, I'm in good shape. If it's not checked, you're just going to want to select it and then choose Modify. If it's checked and Visual Studio isn't, the IntelliSense feature isn't auto-completing for Unity functions, then you're going to want to try unchecking it, modifying, rechecking it, modifying to sort of reinstall this workload, and a lot of times that fixes it. Anyway, I'm in good shape. This is already set up, so unless I try it and it's not working, I'm just going to leave it be. So that's cool. So I've got Visual Studio updated. I've made sure that I have the game development with Unity workload installed, so I'm in good shape. And we can get out of this. Now, I also see here that my Unity 2018.3.1 download has finished. So before I do anything else, here I'm in the Installs tab of the Unity Hub. I'm going to go ahead and change it so that this is my preferred version of Unity. That way, whenever I make a new project, by default, it's going to try and use this. So to do that, I can just select these three dots here and choose Set as Preferred. And you can see this is also how you could uninstall a version of Unity or go back and add one of those components. Like if you ever need to make an Android build or an iPhone build, you can go back later and add that stuff. Alright, so now this is my preferred version of Unity. I've got Visual Studio set up. I guess the next thing we can do is start talking about Git. So Git is the version control solution we're going to use for our class. And there's a handful of ways to get it. And the first way, sort of the official way, is to go to the actual website for Git and download and install Git. I have this listed as optional because these other two things are going to actually, well, actually, never mind this. We'll have to do this no matter what. But this one here, this comes with a bundled version of Git, And then eventually when we start doing this, the GitHub plugin for Unity, that also comes with a bundled version of Git. So you can technically get away with not installing Git. However, you might find yourself in a situation where you would like to use Git from the command line. And as far as I know, the best way to do that is to just go ahead and install Git. So if you want, go ahead and install Git. It's kind of got um, a handful of questions for you once you start installing it. And basically, you can just choose the default for all of them. However, at some point, it will ask you if you want to use what text editor you'd like to use. Maybe I can do this. I already have it installed, but I'm not sure what it's going to do. Anyway, when you get to the part where it asks about what text editor you'd like to use, it's probably a good idea to pick one that is easy for you. So I would recommend just using Visual Studio Code. And if you don't have Visual Studio Code, then you're going to have to go download that. And so it starts to become a little bit heavier weight than you might like. So let's see if I can walk through this git install. So I'm just going to choose next. I'm going to leave all of this stuff just exactly how it is. I'm going to, here's the part I was telling you about. I'm going to use Visual Studio Code. Again, if you don't have that downloaded, when you get to this, you won't be able to choose it. Notepad++ would be good also. Atom is great. Just pick one that you think is easy to use. I would say like some of these more command line ones are have a little bit steeper of a learning curve, so probably best to pick one that you find easy. And if you don't know any of them, use one of these two. These are good. Visual Studio Code and Notepad++. Anyhow, after that, you can just choose all of the default options for all this stuff. Let's see if there's any other surprises here. So I would hit next. I would go ahead and choose this one. I would go ahead and choose the default again, default again, default again. I'm going to leave all of this default, and then I would hit install. I'm not going to do it because I already have it installed, and I don't really know if it's not broke. I'm not going to fix it here, so we'll just leave it at that. All right, so that's the optional git install. Feel free to skip it if you don't want. You can leave it out until you need it. One day you might need it if you need to do something on the command line with git. All right, so not optional is to have a GitHub account. I already have a GitHub account, but maybe I can put this in an incognito window and you can kind of see what happens. If you don't, you just go ahead and choose a username and an email and you're in good shape. Boom, that's Git. Now, there is an advantage to using your school email because there's like a Git for students that has some special perks that you can set up, but it's not required. So use whatever email you want, and you can always actually add emails later. So if you decide you want to go after the student perks, you can always add your student email at that point. All right, but anyway, you do need to have a GitHub account, and that is required for our class. Okay, once you've got a GitHub account, you are going to need to install GitHub Desktop. Now, this is the desktop client that I want to use for Git. You know, by default, you can use the command line for Git, but I think this is going to be a little more user-friendly for us. So there's a Mac client for this as well. If you're on Mac, you'll see a big button for Mac. Just download this and install it, and eventually you'll have something that looks like this. This is what the GitHub Desktop app looks like, and as we use it, I will talk more about it. Alright, so I think that about covers everything on this slide. I'm going to go ahead and stop this video here, and in the next video we can start tackling setting up our Unity project and our repository. Alright, thanks.